Welcome back to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast. And for the first time in podcast history, we have a playoff outside perspective episode and a very special episode as we have our resident Texans fan, Samuel Corona, one of the most diehard Texans fans that I know in my life. And he's got a lot of good stuff for us here today just to give us an insider's look at what this Steelers-Texans matchup is going to be in this wild card round. Samuel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and just give me a little bit of an insight as to why you're a Texans fan.
Thank you for having me here today, Zane. It's such an honor to be a part of the show. But to give you a little bit of a background on how I became a Texans fan, so I grew up in North Carolina, close to Raleigh, just about my entire life. But I was born in San Antonio, and because of that, I've always been a Texan by heart. But I never really grew up watching football, and I was more into soccer at the time, like in elementary school. But one day when I went to my grandparents' house just to spend Thanksgiving with them, they had a football game playing on in the background. And I just looked over and I saw the Detroit Lions playing the Houston Texans. And I just thought the logo looked really cool, Texan scheme, like with the Texans colors. And I think that just drew me to the game itself. So I just ended up watching the whole game, and that day alone, I just fell in love with the team and J.J. Watt. That was his prime, so I really just was in awe of his performance and what he did on the field and off the field. And that's really how I became a Texans fan, and will forever be one. So very proud of where they're at right now, and I think they could potentially make a run.
Well, that's a pretty endearing story. And I guess the easy question to ask is, now that J.J. Watt has transitioned into a broadcasting career, what do you think of him as a broadcaster?
I think he's doing an excellent job. I think he, from a defensive end, I think he has great analysis, and he definitely has the mind of a player. So I think he gives the audience some insight of what players are thinking and what their plan is for the next down. So I think he brings great awareness there. But also, it's just great to listen to him when the Texans happen to be playing the day that he's broadcasting and announcing games. So it's exciting. But probably the best part about all of that is so far Texans are undefeated 4-0 when he is announcing the game. So I think that's something that I would like to continue on moving forward. And I'm guessing he probably won't do any announcing during the playoffs, but hopefully that trend will continue on for next season.
Well, that's really interesting that the Texans have that streak, because for the longest time, whenever it was Ian Eagle and J.J. Watt calling Steelers games, the Steelers were undefeated in a lot of that as well. And I think the only time that they lost was this season when the Steelers played the Bears. J.J. Watt had that game, and that was the first time that they had ever lost when he was on the call. So that's a really interesting nugget about the Texans. It kind of seems like success goes wherever he goes as far as the places that he's associated with, obviously being one of the great all-time Texans, and then also having T.J. Watt still in the league as his brother. That's a really cool insight, and that's something I didn't even know coming into this.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, again, I'm glad that he's able to be an announcer now. It would be awesome if he was a part of this team. I think he would definitely elevate the locker room and make plays, but maybe not as many as he did once in his prime. But I think he could still maybe have a sack or two in a game. But yeah, it's awesome just seeing where he's at now, transitioning from the field into the broadcast booth. And I also, just being a JJ Watt fan, I do root for TJ, and I did when Derek played. So I do hope TJ, does well, but I don't want his performance to fully affect the result of the game. So I do wish TJ the best, if anything.
Well, I guess that's a good place to start as far as this actual game goes. For me, looking at the Texans overall, I think obviously the defense is generational, what they're doing on the other side of CJ Stroud. However, it seems like that the offense has a lot of problems, and I think maybe one of the biggest problems is the offensive line. Can you confirm or deny if that's a big issue as to why the Texans offense hasn't always been the most well-oiled machine this year.
I definitely think the offensive line is the most vulnerable position on this team. And in some ways, I do think they have made improvements over the season, especially with Nick Caley, the offensive coordinator. This is his first season even calling plays for an offense. And he does have a background with the LA Rams and Sean McVay, and then even with the Patriots before then. But I think the offense for the first three games was really struggling with the chemistry of players and being in position, and I think since then they have definitely risen to the occasion, but not on a consistent basis. So I do think the offensive line has improved throughout the season, but I think in some ways, Nick Haley and CJ Stroud and the offense, they've kind of found ways to really make the offensive line not putting too much pressure on them since that 0-3 start to the season.
Is part of that just like, quick screens and stuff, getting the ball out quick, running the ball more? Like, what does that look like as far as like a game plan goes?
So this offense, it doesn't necessarily have a true identity yet, but I will say one thing that they do on a regular basis is this team wants to be a physical run heavy team. Not having Joe Mixon is really just a big loss, not having him for the whole season. But I do think Woody Marks has done an excellent job just to fill that spot just for this season as a rookie and just making the most of it. But also just with Nick Chubb's presence too. He doesn't have the speed that he once had in Cleveland, but he has the understanding and really the knowledge of what they need to do to make positive yardage. So I definitely think that they definitely tried to run the ball first on first and second down, and try to make a few yards. But the other thing that they do, I would say they're really successful at, is the play action, where because they run the ball, those first couple plays, they're able to really draw the defense's attention to the backs, and that gives CJ Stroud just a little bit more freedom and space to run outside of the pocket and either throw it down to his tight end and he can make 5-10 yards after the catch, or in the middle of the field where either Nico Collins or Jaden Higgins might be wide open. So I think that is what they do most successful, but it's also because of their intent to run the ball at least first and second down most of the time.
So if they're not successful running the ball on those early downs, does that create problems for those play action passes later? Is that kind of the predecessor to how the play action is successful, or are they able to do it anyway?
I think even if they aren't as great with the running game, I think that they still do very well with the play action because it's still, again, the defense is in a rhythm of responding to the run first and drawing linebackers' eyes to the backs. Um, but but it definitely does make it more challenging just for the offense itself, because if the defense can't anticipate it being a play action pass, then it's where more than likely they'll be in position at those moments and either not give up as many yardage or just an incomplete pass. So I do think that it does affect how they maybe how much yardage they're able to gain. But for the most part, I think even if the running game isn't as successful, they're still they can still get the first downs and even like 12, 15 yard offensive gain on plays.
Okay. Now, what are your thoughts on CJ Stroud's arm talent right now? Is he winning games for you guys? I mean, obviously you guys are on a 9-game winning streak. How much of that can you attribute to CJ Stroud as opposed to maybe the defense just taking over these games in itself?
I think since the 0-3 start, I think this offense has realized that the main thing that they need to do is not turn over the ball. Because for the most part, the way that the Texans have been winning games is by the turnover margins. And I want to say we're one of the best at it. I want to say third in the NFL at least. When CJ Stroud came back on the field after he had sustained a concussion in the middle of the season, he I will say he was able to kind of take a back just sit back and really realize how to win games, and that's just by not turning the ball over and or throwing the ball just out of bounds or an incomplete pass instead of taking a sack and having negative yardage, meaning that you'd have to make those yards back on the next play. So I think that's something that CJ Stroud has realized. He definitely has the arm talent still. He can throw the ball deep and accurate, and I think when he can complete those first couple passes, he really has a rhythm. So I think that he's doing well, and he's doing what the Texans need to do at least to win games. And I do believe that if he needs to take it in his own hands, I think he can get the job done. And he's shown that throughout the season on just in several games. But for the most part, I would say he still has that talent. It's just that this is a new offense, a lot of first year players just on the roster or just rookies. And so I do think that he's had better chemistry with his receivers and with his offensive line. And again, just a better understanding of what he needs to do to protect the ball and live another down.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time that's pretty standard across the board, but it definitely makes a lot of sense as to why the Texans have rattled off 9 straight wins, because if you are protecting the football and your defense is turning other teams over, I just did a little check there. They're second in the league in turnover margin, only behind the Chicago Bears. So you were right all over that. It's like if you protect the ball, if you win the turnover margin, much like the Steelers' game plan has been forever under Mike Tomlin, you're going to be successful. And again, if you're passable at the quarterback position and you can make those splash plays every once in a while, I mean that's a winning formula. Now, it's even easier, especially when your defense is as insane as it is. What's the catalyst for the defense's success? Is it the front four? Is it the linebacking level? Is it the cornerbacks? Is it the safeties? Is it all of it? I mean, this defense is giving up 17 points a game, so obviously something is what's making it tick, right?
It's really I mean, I can talk about this defense all day, but it's really the whole squad itself, all 11 players on the field. And I mean, I think gotta give respect to the defensive line. I think they definitely bring the energy and just really the physicality while getting pressure on the quarterback and making the offensive tackles and guards uncomfortable. But Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter, they're by far the two best defensive edges just on not only on the team, but really in the NFL. They might be the scariest duo right now. Respect to Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, but just this season alone, I mean, they've generated 27 sacks together. Daniil with 15, Will Anderson with 12, and they both account for 35 tackles for loss. And even then, they've been able to strip the ball out of quarterbacks' hands, generating six forced fumbles. So they know how to get to the quarterback, really make him uncomfortable, and try to generate turnovers. And to complement them, the defensive tackles, even though they don't have big name players like Cam Hayward, they're able to stop the run. They're able to just fill in the gaps when pressuring the quarterback, and really they're just in position. So they have a really great group there on that defensive line, and I mean by far one of the best this season. And then going from the D line to the linebacker room, Aziz Al Shire and Henry Toto, they're ferocious. They hit like it's no one's business at all. So. Like there's a lot of times throughout the season where I've seen a tight end in the middle of the field or a receiver in the middle of the field. They're about to catch a ball, but then next thing you know, they look to their left or their right to make sure they have enough space to run after the catch. And But the one thing that they need to do is catch the ball, and that's the last thing they think of. So with their presence there in the middle of the field, a lot of times it just draws attention to the receivers and tight ends and makes them double think their career. Um, so but they also play with intelligence, and they're always in position, and they're both great stopping the run. And Al Shire, he's really the heart of the defense. So it's going from that to then the secondary. I mean, there are some ball hawks in that secondary with Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, and Kalen Bullock. They play like it's no one's business, and they're not afraid of playing one-on-one with any receiver or tight end. They just have great communication and understanding of where they need to be, and if they have support, and just in coverage, they understand where they need to be in position, just like the linebackers. And all four players, again, they have ball skills, but Stingley by far has been known to have the best hands on the team. So that's even like saying he has better hands than our best receiver, Nico Collins. And I mean, that was something that was really praised back when he played for LSU in college. But the only thing that kind of stopped him with that conversation was Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, two legendary and more than likely future Hall of Famers. So yeah, they just are sticky in coverage, and they can really lock down any receiver that's in front of them.
It just sounds like a really well-oiled machine. It sounds like it's really well coached. And, when you have a team that has a lot of raw talent that's coached so well, that buys into a philosophy, I mean, you just look at the numbers and you can see that this is why they're so successful as a unit this season, not only on the front, but in the back end too. And, this is what makes it scary for pretty much, I would think, any team that's playing the Texans in these playoffs, and especially a Steelers team that, they've got DK Metcalf. He's coming back this week, which is great, but the depth afterwards, and I mean, you talked about that the corners and the safeties are not afraid to play one-on-one. Steelers playing one-on-one against, some really good defensive backs is going to put a lot of pressure on Aaron Rodgers, but also a lot of pressure on, the fact that we need to be able to move the ball down the field if the run's not going to be there. So I guess the question that I want to pose back to you is, I've got plenty of concerns, obviously, with your little diatribe on the Texans defense, but what do you have concern-wise as far as the Steelers team goes, whether that's offensively or defensively?
I think the biggest concern, starting with the offense, is again that offensive line. Even though they have made improvements and the offense has taken some of the pressure off of the offensive line by doing play action passes or trying to get the ball out quickly or just trying to run the ball more, I think if the Steelers call blitzes, I think they can really disrupt the passing game. And I wouldn't say get to CJ Stroud, like from a talent perspective, but just mentally in the game, just because not having a lot of time and time being the receivers not being able to develop their routes or get to where they need to be, and everything sort of being off schedule. So I definitely think the Steelers calling blitzes is something that they could do really well against this offensive line. And the Texans don't really do screens very often. And if they do any sort of screen pass, is going to be sort of a dump down to the running back. So this is an offense that doesn't really do any sort of screens. If they do a quick pass, like while CJ's under pressure, he'll either throw it to the middle of the field if there's an open gap and Nico is there, or maybe Dalton Schultz is there, or he'll throw it deep and maybe Jaden Higgins running a vertical route or Nico, especially if they're one-on-one with a defensive back, with both of them being 6'3" and 6'4" in height. So I think the Steelers can definitely really pressure this Texans offense if they call a lot of blitzes, especially on passing downs. And transitioning from the offense to the defense, again, there's not a lot of flaws to this defense. This defense plays as a unit. But probably one of the most vulnerable areas on this defense is if you match up a running back with the linebackers. And mostly, and I'm saying this as a passing play. And that can either be a screen, which we've done well with screenplays, but occasionally you'll have a 10 or 15 yard run after the catch. But I think what really hurts the linebackers is if maybe Kenneth Gainwell or even Jalen Warren, if they're positioned on the outside and either just kind of run a vertical route or sort of just a um, quick slant, something a 5 yard route going in and making your way out. So I think the Steelers could definitely take advantage of what they have in the running back room with Gainwell and Warren. And lastly, I will mention that with the Texans playing single high, meaning that they have just one safety in the back. There have been times where Kalen Bullock has been juked by the receiver, thinking he's going one way, but then he cuts the opposite direction. And there have been opportunities with receivers making big plays like that. Doesn't happen often, but it has happened, and they usually don't go for touchdowns, but a play is a play. So I think the Steelers could draw something up like that. Maybe not with DK, but but definitely with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Especially seeing him play against that Ravens secondary. I think he maybe did that once or twice, but I know he definitely has speed and he can create separation on a long route like that. So I would say those are the vulnerabilities of this Texans team.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot of really good insights. And, I think that you broke it down really well, especially with making the mention of Kenneth Gainwell, because frankly, he's the Steelers' leading receiver as a running back. And you're talking about this matchup with the linebackers. So, if we continue to go with the formula that we've had with, again, a lot of these little dink and dunk plays kind of going to our running backs, maybe that is the way to kind of cracking this Texans defense. So with that, I do want to ask you, what do you think this game turns out to be? I would like a score prediction, and I would like you to tell me who you think is going to win this game and advance to the divisional round of the AFC playoffs. What do you think? What do you got here, Samuel?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of imagery. So I do think that the Steelers, again, go with their running back duo and try to create big plays on the receiving end by exploiting the linebackers' coverage on at least on maybe one vertical route with Kenneth Gainwell. I saw that one play he made against Detroit. So I think that that is a play that Aaron Rodgers will see and will possibly take advantage of. But I definitely think the Steelers used the running back duo just heavily on this game. But I also think that the Texans will rely on the play action game, that being like 6 to 8 plays in the game. And along with that, I do think that with Nico Collins' talent, I do think that he will draw double coverage on him, which always, for the most part, throughout this season. It's just created opportunities for Jaden Higgins, Dalton Schultz, Xavier Hutchinson, for those players to be open and make great plays. And then along with that, because of this Texans defensive line and playing with speed, I think Rodgers will throw the ball very quickly. I know he has a fast release, so I do think he'll make some quick passes. And I do think both offensive lines will struggle somewhat against pressure and not really run the ball efficiently. So with all that being said, the final score prediction of this game, Steelers 16, Texans 20. And I say 20 just because in every game except the facing against the Ravens in Week 5, the Texans have not scored more than 20 games in an away game outside of the Ravens game, and we know how terrible their defense was this year. So I do think this one is going to be an old style defensive game, and but I do think this. I think the Steelers will surprise some spectators out there that might might not watch as many Steelers or even Texans games. So I do think this one will be a physical one in the cold, but I do have full belief that this Texans squad can go into Pittsburgh and really any stadium and really draw the energy out of the fans. So I think that's what they do in Pittsburgh.
That's a great breakdown, and you gave us a very detailed breakdown of what you think this game's going to look like. And it's interesting that you say that stat about the 20 points. The one game that I kind of did actually tune into this season with the Texans was the back end of the Kansas City game, which I think a lot of people were having their eyes on, especially given where Kansas City was at that time. And you saw this Texans team, which had been relying on Davis Mills and maybe playing a little bit of, not as good competition in the previous weeks. They go into Kansas City, which is a place that's hard to win at, and they go in and they beat a team that has been, incredible for the last who knows how long. So I think that's a great breakdown of what the Texans can do. And, as far as things go, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you're looking at this on paper, that's something that you could definitely see happening. And I hope that this game is as good as, we're thinking it's going to be. I hope that I'm thinking it's going to be a defensive slog myself. So, that's kind of the thoughts that I have. And, I'm just hoping that this one's a good one because the Steelers have frankly just not been competitive in a playoff game in 10 years, essentially. So I'm wanting this one to be close, and I think it's going to be close. And I think based on your breakdown, I think that's what it's going to be like. So, we appreciate you coming on here, Samuel, and you're an unbelievable ball knower. You know your stuff, and you know your Texans, and you know about the other parts of the league, too. You're talking about the Steelers as much as I am. So, we appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate you giving us an outside perspective on the Houston Texans, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and again, thank you for just having me on the show today. And I do wish the best for Mike Tomlin and T.J. Watt, but I just personally don't think it'll be their day Monday night.
Well, that's the thing. We're talking about Mike Tomlin. We're talking about T.J. Watt. T.J. Watt has never won a playoff game in his career, if you can imagine that. Mike Tomlin, we've talked about at length on this podcast that we just don't know if he has the fire anymore. And this is one of those games where if he doesn't have it, then he might be on the chopping block just as much as John Harbaugh was just yesterday. So, but we'll get to that point when we get there. And again, we just thank you for coming on, Samuel, and we hope to have you on at some point in the future. I do believe that the Steelers play the Texans next season, so we'll have to get you back on.
Oh yeah, definitely, and maybe I might have some bragging rights by then with some of my friends who are also Steelers fans. But we'll see how the game ends up, and maybe I'm wrong, but with my prediction. But I think we both can agree that this will be a physical game, and it will come down to the wire.
I couldn't agree more. And with that, we will sign off on this episode of Boardman Black and Gold, which is always sponsored by Zecca Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. You can call 919-406-4679 to turn your furniture problems into furniture solutions. Be sure you keep an eye out for our episode with myself and David, highlighting what we think is going to happen in this Houston Texans game. We already have our Ravens recap up, so make sure you check that one out as well. And as always, you can follow us on Instagram at Boardman and Gold. Make sure you give us your opinions on what you think is going to happen in this Texans game. Give us your score predictions. Give us your team MVP for either side, I guess, whoever you think is going to win the game. And again, this is Zane Bloom, joined with Samuel Corona, our resident Texans fan, for an Outside Perspective episode. The first Outside Perspective episode before a playoff game. Big game coming up, lads. Steelers, Texans, Monday Night Football. Who's going to win and move on to the divisional round in the AFC playoff picture? We'll find out here in just a couple of days. But make sure, again, that you tune in tomorrow for myself and David's episode as we get ready for this Texans game. Thanks, as always, for listening. I'm Zane Bloom. We'll see you tomorrow on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast.